Hello everyone and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host Adz and John. Before we start today's podcast, if you're looking for surfing and outdoor gear, look no further. Go to Northcore on the internet and use the discount code capital letters GrumpySurfer15 to receive 15% off your purchase. Northcore are one of the leading surfing hardware brands in my eyes for the quality of product they create, so don't miss out. Also, before we start, the WaveKey guys have given us a discount code. So if you want 10% off your WaveKey subscription, use the code capital letters, one word, WaveKeyGrump to receive 10% off your subscription. And this is valid until the 1st of July 2021. So if you want 10% off your WaveKey subscription, use the code capital letters, WaveKeyGrump to receive 10% off your subscription. What can I say about my guest today? He works for a previous podcast guest, Dan Maker, and runs a mirror company called Green Overhead. Their main priority is organising surf trips in Indonesia and the Maldives, but also selling some of the best surfing brands in the world such as Sharpeye and Dakine. So please enjoy my conversation with John Jameson. John Jameson, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hello, mate. I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, good. It's a bit early for me this morning, but the sun's out. So, nice way to start the day. Thanks for having me.
Early? It's 9 o'clock.
That's early for me.
Do you know what? It's really, really nice to be able to actually do this social distancing, of course, in person as opposed to doing it over Zoom.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to this. I'm actually out of the house, being able to talk to somebody, look at them properly. Yeah, and just getting out and about, and it's a godsend. And with the sun out and shining, even though it's a bit early, I get up early now anyway, whatever, just get out of the house.
It's been quite strange, and our little lockdown serials are starting to come to an end slowly, so
yep,
things are only going to get better, I think.
Yeah. A lot of people were surfing, I think, when they lived on the beach during lockdown. If you couldn't do that, it must have been an absolute killer. I don't know how people are surviving, but it's coming to an end now. Just need to travel. As soon as that opens up, we are home and hosed.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why we're going to have a little chat about. But yeah, I found everyone's perceptions of how they took these lockdowns and the COVID piece very, very strange, because some people didn't want to leave their house, even though they lived 5-10 minutes from the beach, a couple of miles from the beach. Other people did. There were people that were drawn a little bit. Sometimes they were like, no, I can't do that today because of such and such, or I'm going to go down to the beach. And so they kind of split 50-50. I thought it was all really strange because obviously there was no real proper guidance. It was all more like guidelines and stuff.
Yeah, and is surfing exercise or not? Well, we know it is because we surf loads. If you didn't surf and you didn't know actually how physically hard it can be, especially where we surf all the time, right? Is it really exercise, and people kicking off about it, and how local is local, and can you walk to the beach? Do you cycle? It was all a bit strange. Got a bit weird back then for a while.
I enjoyed myself anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Me too. Yeah. I see you buzzing around out back on some of those big bombs.
Yeah, mate. Have you been watching the WSL stuff?
I have.
The Newcastle event's just finished.
Yeah. There's some funny thing. Yeah. What did I see? I think it must have been like the round of 16, hopping their way through from like shoulder high out back all the way to that gnarly little shore break that seemed to break boards every 5 minutes. But yeah, it's been pretty good. It's just good to see it back. It's good to see all the boys back in the water, ripping, of course. They're all still absolutely ripping. I think the fact they got it in Australia means that they obviously can hold 2 or 3 legs without having to fly everybody everywhere, which is going to be pretty good. It means they can do probably quite a number of events in one hit in a short space of time.
Yeah, so they're doing 4 events. So they've just done the first one in Newcastle. The next one's in Narrabeen in a week or so, and then they're going over to the west coast. They're going to do Margaret River, and then they've got, I can't remember what the island's called. There's like a little island on the west coast that.
Yeah. Oh, I can't remember that one.
They're basically going to stay on there, and it's kind of been tied in a little bit with like the Rip Curl Search, kind of thing.
Oh well, they'll be flying to go over to WA, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean that'll be pretty cool. I thought the Newcastle event was all right, but it kind of took the premise away of the Dream Tour, where they went to this beach break in Newcastle, and the conditions for the first sort of like day and a half were pretty
shocking. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what we get. I mean, it'll have a lot more punch. I mean, I surfed that wave loads of times on that beach just because it's right there by the town. But yeah, it wasn't so much dream tour. I mean, what's crazy though is still the moves that they do in those sorts of waves. And like, it got to like the semi-finals and the final, they're still finding barrels. It's just ridiculous. And if you think about how they're surfing those sorts of waves, when it is actually the dream tour and they're back at like massive Margaret River, like remember some of those John turns he was doing a few years back before the pandemic. It was crazy. It was like 8 to 10 foot on his was it a 6.0 Ghost he was riding, Paizel Ghost.
I mean, some of those boards that are just surfing the North Shore on like 510s, 511s is absolutely crazy, isn't it? Insane. I mean, back when we first started, that would have been like a 6.8, a 7.2 sort of semi-gun.
Yeah, 8 foot long, about a foot wide, and with about 20 litres of volume in it, just paddling around catching nothing. But we look good. At the time, it wouldn't look good now. It's definitely not a good look.
Yeah. Big Wave Dave with his massive board on the top, and everyone's got his little short sticks.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's changed. But no, it's good to see him back in. I mean, I've been glued to the app watching it. A few, I mean, I've got my favourites who I want to win. But I think, I mean, this contest was just dominated by the Brazilians. I mean, they're great in those sorts of waves, right? Exactly the same as they get in Brazil. They were brought up on those sorts of waves, and they, just punt out a massive air reverse with no speed, yet they're going super high. I don't know how they do it. That's crazy. I
think it's really strange because I listen to a lot of podcasts, which people that listen to this know I do. And a lot of guys were bringing out like the big guns saying, Ryan Callahan was going to win it. Like all the local guys, Morgan Siblitz did really, really well. Knocked out John.
He did, yeah. Riding his 77 sharp eye.
Yeah, which was absolutely outstanding. And I think it was, no one saw that one coming at all. Rips. But there was a lot of really good surfing. I mean, Italo, Philippe Toledo, Medina as well. So Gabriel Medina absolutely flying over. But the one thing that I took away from it was Chris Amore's air in the final. I was like, because I've watched surfing for so long, and I really like women surfing, not because they're chicks, but because I find that they're not really concentrating so much on like power. It's more technique and flow. Yeah,
they're trying to get turns in. More maneuvers.
It's a little bit like their styles that they surf with is so unique, whereas you've got the guys that are on the actual main tour. They're all under coaches and people like that. So everything can be a little bit robotic and look very, very similar unless you're looking at the, minor things. And for her to throw something like that out there, put surfing for women like right on the map, I think it was just super amazing. Even though it was just like frontside Rio or something, wasn't it? Or 360?
Just frontside 360. Yeah. It's funny. I mean, she didn't even look like she was going that fast, but she still got up there. And the landing, I love the landing because she stuck the landing and then whipped it round like the last 180. As soon as those fins stuck in, she whipped it round super quick. So it was great to see it at such a high level in the final. There's a few other ladies that are doing those sorts of turns and doing those sorts of airs. Sally Fitzgibbons has landed a few. There's loads of others. If you watch them free surf, they land loads, which is great. But it does take it to another level. And again, it's Merriweather Beach. The waves weren't that great. So that is a whole other level of surfing. I mean, if you and I were out there, we probably wouldn't even go in. We'd be in the pub. But then we might just kind of splosh around and get hammered on the inside.
Yeah, that shelf of rocks on the inside looks super gnarly. I was like that.
I got my name all over it. Yeah, from the back of my head or something.
Mate, so let's have a little talk about your background. And one of the reasons why you're on the podcast today is we've come to talk about boat trips.
Yeah.
So I did Dan Maker a few weeks ago, who is one of the owners of Green Over Sports. There's a sideline to Green Over Sports called Green Overhead, which you're part of.
Yeah, part of that.
And you organise boat trips for them, don't you?
I do. Yeah. Green Overhead is like the surfing element of what Dan does. I mean, I know he talked about it a little bit on the last podcast. So he sent me here to talk about the boat trip part of it, the surfing part of it, boards, all that sort of stuff. But it's one of those areas that like everyone talks about it. Like I can't really go to the beach now and stick my car in a car park without someone coming over and saying, when's the next trip? How do I go on it? How, I'll send you my email details, all that sort of stuff. And you're like, yeah, cool. So it's just become, I guess, over the last 20 years, 21, 22 years, it's become a bit of a beast. And I was doing it just for basically shits and giggles and trips. A usual crew of boys every year, 2-3 times a year, whatever. But then it just grew. And I was like, well, why are we putting in all this effort just for having like a bit of fun? Because we're now going on trips with people that we don't know that well. The boats are getting bigger. The destinations are getting a little bit more out there. The travel's getting harder to logistically work out. And the people that we're taking with us are getting a little bit more needy. And different groups have different needs. Some just pay and they're going to be there because they've been loads of times before. Some people, they literally need the hand being held through the airport, which is fine. It doesn't actually bother me. So we turned it into probably still trips for mates, but I'd say it's got a little bit of a kind of marketing element to it. And if it runs a small business and it helps it tick over, then there's loads of trips for loads of our mates and loads of extra people. And there's kit and there's boards, and then that span into doing boards, which is spun into wetsuits. So kind of growing by the week, despite the pandemic.
Let's do what I always do and take it right back to the beginning. So let's talk a little bit about your background. So like where you grew up and how you actually got into surfing itself to get to where you are.
Yeah, I grew up in Dorset originally, but spent most of my time in Devon. So from a young age, I was like in the sea all the time. My mum was a windsurfer. My dad into normal sports, a lot of football and rugby. I was kind of into loads and loads of sports, but I got to mid-teens, I'd say. So quite late to get into surfing, actually. I got into my mid-teens. I was windsurfing loads and always in the water. So loads of fishing. Did a whole bunch of wakeboarding and water skiing and all that sort of stuff. But got on my first surfboard in my teenage years, and then just didn't get off it, basically. And despite like going to uni and all those sorts of things, I've always been in Devon or actually been travelling. So I left home and went to uni pretty early, actually. Like I was at uni at 18, but I was gone from home at 17 and then just surfed. So I did the least minimum effort at university, but just surf with a whole bunch of boys that I got to know that they're all from Cornwall, north coast of Cornwall. So I was down there from, I'd say, mid-teens, and haven't really left despite all the travel. So it's been surfing here, boat trips, lots of travel, but never really looked back. And I don't really do anything else, to be honest.
Where did you travel? Where were some of the places that you travelled when you were younger? Yeah,
so I think it all... So really young was all the usual places like France every year for a big long stint. Loads of Fuerteventura trips. All those sorts of stereotypical places that you go when you got no money. You've maybe got a week that you can get away and you want a cheap flight, cheap accommodation, all that sort of stuff, but you want a guarantee way. So we spent a lot of winters, Fuerteventura, all the Canary Islands, Morocco a fair bit during the winters here. And then it all sort of started, I think, 21, 22 years ago, where I went to Bali for a good amount of time and then over to Australia as well and kind of bounced between the two, which if you're going to really work on your surfing and surf loads of good waves non-stop, that's the place to do it because the flights are dead easy. You're in and out of both countries really super quick. So like where the CT is now, Merriweather, Newcastle, surfed that a whole bunch. Was down on the northern beaches in just north of Sydney. So lived in Avalon for a little bit, but surfed Narrabeen, Avalon, all those sorts of waves. I mean, they're all very typical Australian beach breaks, but you can surf every day. And then in and out of Bali. I mean, I remember being in Bali at Karamas before any of the hotels or anything were there, and it's just an amazing right-hander, which was pretty empty. So surfed that loads. And then obviously up on the peninsula, surfing Padang, Ulus, all the way through to Dreamlands, even spent a few weeks just surfing the main beach at Kuta because it had a sandbar on it, which was pumping. So it started there really, and that's what flicked the Indo switch. And I guess I just got a bit bored of being on the land, because every now and again you'd be in a lineup and a boat would turn up and you'd be like, where have you guys come from? And they're like, oh, well, actually we've been on a boat and now we're just having a few days in Bali chilling out. And I was like, well, what's a boat like? And you just jump off the boat and you surf. You know, there's no messing around. All the boys are on the boat. It's like a floating hotel. We've got a whole bunch of beers. The stereo's going. And this is back in like 1999, 2000. And I was like, I've got to give that a go. So I came home to the UK, put a really small crew together, and that's where it started.
I surfed Bali quite a bit between sort of 2000 and 2006. And when you said about Karamas, I was trying to remember the other day, because when I first watched it on the TV, you know, on the comp on the WSL, I was looking at it. Oh, that looks so familiar. Like, not the hotels and stuff like you're saying, but just sort of like the surrounding area.
Yeah.
And I remember I got to know a couple of the beach boys, some of the locals that just rented the surfboards on the beach in Kuta. You know, I got to know them, paid them a little bit of money, and they used to, you know, take me around and, you know, lash me up with a bit of food and stuff. That's how I ended up out in G-Land. Fuck me, that's another story. But
we'll get into that one later.
And yeah, I ended up at this one place, and I just remember sitting there, and you know, like the little wooden shelters that they built just back off the beach.
Yeah, right.
I remember just pulling up there on the back of a bike and just standing there and just seeing this perfect, like, little right-hander, almost like an A-frame, knocking out, and I was like, oh my God. And there was no one there.
Yeah.
There was no one there.
Empty back then.
So the three of us just grabbed our boards off these bikes and just jumped out there, and it was like, you know, head high, a little bit above head high.
Yeah.
Anything for me is above head high, because I'm about 4 foot tall. But so we paddled out there, and it's just like this perfect lineup for like a whole day. And I come out, and one of the lads had nipped away and gone to see his mate and got some like grilled fish and some, you know, sticky rice, and we're eating that, and then we go back in again.
Yeah, you can surf. I mean, you can surf non-stop out there. It's sick. I mean, even in the off season, like in the winter, it's still really good. And in my mind, I always do this thing. It's like, well, do I want to be at home in a 6'4" hooded wetsuit, driving around trying to find some quiet corner out the way of some howling southwest wind, and even then it's going to be rubbish, and you'll probably get attacked by a seal, something crap's going to happen, or you snap your board, or you spend the whole time paddling? Or do you just want to float around somewhere having saved up a little bit of cash, which is what we did when we were a lot younger? You know, you've got no idea really what you're doing, but you've saved up 500 quid from working on a building site, and you fly over there. And I remember I went there with my missus, and we were at Karamas actually, and it was just perfect. Like you say, head high, but that's a great wave. Although you can't see the reef, and the reef is bloody sharp, like way sharper than anyone would think, and because you can't see it, you don't know how deep it is. But anyway, and I'm sat in the lineup, I'm looking back at the beach, and there's a guy trying to sell my wife a steering wheel, and she wasn't my wife at the time, a steering wheel and a crossbow. And it was the weirdest sensation I've ever had. I'm sat there thinking, do I go in and help out? Because it's a pretty good looking crossbow. But I quite like the steering wheel as well. I'm like, only in Bali could we be doing this. Anyway, I stayed in the lineup for another couple of hours and left her to it.
Yeah, I took my wife to Bali the one and only time that I went with her. And it was when we first met. It was the summer of when we first met. And I told her, look, I was going there anyway. I'd already bought my ticket. I said, do you want to come? I went in the water the first day for about 3 hours. She was not happy when I got out.
Was that the first surfing experience? The first surfing, right, I'm hooked up with a surfer here. I'm in a tropical destination and I haven't seen them all day.
Yeah. So, she's a northern girl. She's from like Liverpool way up by the Wirral. And, it really didn't go down well. She probably had this, dream imagination about going to Indonesia and, walking through the jungle and doing this and just chilling on the beach.
Cocktails at 5. It's like, no, that's not happening.
Little did she know she was going to be on her own the majority of the time.
Mine was the same. I remember before we flew to Australia, like when we first met, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Australia. You coming? She said, yeah. I was like, you need to know that I'm going to go for surfing and see that massive board bag full of boards. It's because I'm going to be in the water a lot. So I remember that conversation. It was in a pub, actually, very late one night. And I was like, look, just so you know, I will be surfing a lot. And I remember having to explain what that actually meant. She was like, what, like half an hour? I'm like, no. As soon as the sun comes up to when the sun goes down, I might get out for lunch, but we'll see. Back in the days when I was fit and you could actually surf for that amount of time. Yeah, not these days. But no, she got used to it pretty quick, so it was fine.
So when you were doing those trips and you were talking to those guys about being on a boat, was that kind of the little fire that lit behind you? So how did you actually get into organising boat trips in the first place?
Yeah, so I came home from that. Yeah, I did like the fire, and I came home, and I was surfing regularly with a bunch of guys from Cornwall, some of which were just awesome surfers. You know, really, really good. So what we said is, well, look, we'll do 6 months worth of work. We'll slog it out, whatever we need to do. Literally building sites, restaurants, whatever it was. I think I was a brickie for a good 6 months. Terrible brickie. Put the cash together, and the first time we did it, actually, we found a really cheap trip. It was a 2-week boat trip in the Maldives, and we were like, well, that's going to be easier to get to than Indo, so we'll just see how it goes. And also the cost of Indo at that time, it was really high cost, but the boats, like the safety, it was all a little bit dodgy, and there's loads of stuff. I mean, I got so many stories, it's a bit crazy. So we all put some money together, and we did a very stereotypical thing where I just emailed World Safaris down on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. And I know through a friend of a friend, I knew a few guys that run World Safaris. We got some good friends that emigrated and now live like next door to their offices. So I'd spoken to them before, and they hooked us up with a 2-week boat trip to the Maldives. And I think that was 1999, maybe something like that. And we didn't charter the whole boat. It was, I mean, looking back now, it was some crappy 70-foot. I mean, I don't know what it was. It barely had an engine. It barely moved, and it stank of diesel when we got there. So we learnt a lot on that first trip. And I didn't think it was going to be a regular thing. We're just going to do a boat trip. It's going to be amazing. It's a one-off life event. Amazing memories. But then when we came back, I was like, well, I think we can do that better. Because, of course, what happens is you turn up, you get on your boat, you park up in the lineup. And because we didn't charter the whole boat, there was like 4 of us went. And then there was another crew of 4 guys. I can't remember where they were from. And then there's a couple other guys. So we had 10 on the boat, 4 of which we knew and 6 of which we didn't. But as our boat would pull up to the lineup, like, you got to hang your head in shame. It was that bad. So people would instantly, as soon as you jump off the boat and paddle into the lineup, they'd start taking the piss. They're like, are you off that crappy old pirate ship? We're like, yeah. And then when they clock on the fact you got a British accent, you kind of really have to take your place in the queue and wait to get a wave. But that was cool. I mean, it was good fun because it was the first one and you learn loads, but we didn't go with the intention of making it a regular thing. But looking from our boat at the other boats, and the fact that, you know, they got a big boat and they've got like in the Maldives, a donny that whizzes them in and around the lineup, so you're way more mobile. And some of them had proper speedboats at that point, ribs and stuff. I was like, yeah, you can do this much better. And then, of course, you do your research properly when you get back, and you're like, God, we paid the same price for what we had as what they've paid for those amazing boats. And the difference is that they're super organised and they've got a crew of like 8 or 10, or maybe 6 to 10, and we just faffed about and went with 4. If we'd just taken a couple more of our mates, we probably could have done it way better and had a whole boat to ourselves, which is definitely a better way of doing it. If you got a crew on a boat that you don't know, and say the boat split 50-50, one crew and then the guys that you know, you always get that debate of where are we going to go, where are we going to surf. And
you've got those
now.
levels as well, though, haven't you? Because,
yeah.
you know, you could be 4 pro surfers that rock up on a boat, and then you've got guys that are like, you know, lower level intermediate that don't really want to surf, you know, massive
totally.
Sultans that's just smashing shallow, like 2-foot reef.
Well, we've had that before as well. I mean, I've done trips where we've taken a smaller crew, we've got on a really good boat, and we had, 1 year, there was a whole chunk. I mean, I can't even remember who they were. It's like Dane Beaver and a few of those guys from the northern, from Australia, like Northern Beaches. a whole load of that, I'd say, early 2000 rip curl crew. We were on a boat with those guys. There's 5 of them and 3 of us. And we basically sat in the lineup watching them getting pitted every day, doing massive turns, punting airs. And we were like, oh my God, it's our turn. We got to paddle into this thing. And it's a bit of a shocker. So you have a week. I mean, you learn to surf just by watching, and you're pushed to your limits. But it makes for a bit of a nervous week. It's like 8 foot, and maybe it's about a foot deep on the reef. You're like, oh crap, it's my go. I've got to go.
Well, yeah, I couldn't imagine doing that. I mean, I've been quite lucky. The couple of the boat trips that I've done, we've done with a couple of teams and stuff. So we've had like 10 to 12 people on there.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, the only problem with that is that you do have varying ability. And one of my main problems that I have, and this is no disrespect to anybody that I surf with, you know, my friends as well, is that the levels are very different a lot of the time. So, you know, when I want to go and surf, when it's really good and it's big, I want to go and surf some like shallow reefs around, you know, Devon and Cornwall. I can't really go with those people, and 9 times out of 10, without blowing my smoke up my own ass, I'm surfing on my own, because I know that if I go down there, they're going to look at it, or if they go out, they're just going to get absolutely annihilated. So it's kind of a similar thing with the boat trip, isn't it? Once you pull up to a lineup, that's pretty much you. Yeah,
I mean, there's two major things I've learned. And you're right, one of them, I mean, we surfed a well-known left-hander not long ago in that big pumping early season swell that we had. There was me, you, and a handful of others that we know that are out there. But a lot of people turned up that day, looked at it and didn't get in, just because the current was going to basically take people half a mile down the coast. So you get that, the first thing is like, what's people's ability and how comfortable are they going to be if we put them on the boat? And how do they mix with all the other surfers? And it's a bit weird. It's kind of like, I don't know whether it's social engineering or whether it's like just gauging how different people surf and what sorts of waves they want to surf. But you can never, ever put a full boat trip together where everybody is at the same level and they want to surf the same waves. Like, you get some rippers that just want to go right-hander on their forehands. You get some rippers that only ever want to go left because they're goofy footers. And that can be one reason why the boat will divide. And then you get different types of waves. Like I don't like the massive surf, because you just end up going straight, basically. You're getting 2 waves and then that's it. So I know exactly what I want. But if you set up a boat trip, it's like you want to make sure everyone gets waves. So how everybody surfs and what they're going to want to surf is one aspect. Then the other aspect is actually getting them on the boat in the first place. Because you'd be amazed, like I said earlier on, like if I turn up at the local, you're in the car park and there's a whole bunch of people that have been on trips or they've booked to come on the next trip. So they're asking loads of questions. It's like, so yeah, you're only on the boat once you've paid. And that is the biggest barrier. And it's amazing. The number one excuse is, well, I've just got to check in with the missus. As soon as I hear that, I'm like, yeah, no, they're not coming. So they might rip, they might be, yeah, I'm going to go and surf Macaronis, or I'm going to go and surf Burger World, and we're going to smash it, all this sort of stuff. And then they say, but I'm going to check with my missus. I'm like, yeah, he's out. He's not coming.
You know, one of my jobs in the Marines is, you know, is event organising.
Yeah, right. You've seen it all then.
Yeah, so until that transition of money is there, even if it's just a deposit, it's really difficult to hook people in. I've run a couple of trips myself, and nothing major, but getting money out of people is really difficult. Now, we do subsidised stuff because the way that the military works is that you can gain funding for doing sport or adventure training.
Yeah.
And then you'd pay like a personal contribution towards it. But you'd be surprised, just asking 50 quid for somebody to do something.
Oh, that's a nightmare. Yeah.
That would cost you £400 is ridiculous. 50 quid? I'm not paying that.
Yeah, yeah.
But look how much it would cost if you were going, and all your transport, all your food.
You don't even have to think, it's all done.
It's all done for you because I'm organising it. I'm the one that's like doing all the paperwork, getting all the insurances, booking it all. I'm doing it. Yeah. All you got to do is give me that cash.
Just turn up at the airport
and
for
turn
us.
up with your shit.
Yeah. Well, we have the same. I mean, it's one thing we find is that we usually. I mean, it's very rare that we ever do this, and saying it, we literally did it last night, that we dropped a boat trip in for, like, I think as soon as the legal release of all of the lockdown restrictions is gone on the 21st of June, we're literally a week later we're going. So we've done one really quick there. But people won't commit to something that's like 12 months away. But you are never going to get on a boat trip these days unless you commit 12 months out minimum. I mean, we've also, like 2022, booking up trips. Because what we do is we know so many of the operators now that I can guarantee, like me and Dan, we can put a crew together dead easy. And I reckon we've probably got a list of 60, 70 surfers that are good for it. You know, they don't have to check with the missus, they're in, whatever. Just want to go on a boat trip and have it organised for them. So we can fill a boat straight away. So what we do is we know a whole bunch of the operators, not the big, I mean, we know the big businesses, but the smaller ones with the good boats and the good guides. I mean, a lot of them are British. Where they know we're good for it, we book up trips, but we get basically mates rates prices. So when we say, like, in 12 months time, we're going to come on this boat trip, we're going to go to Indo, there's like, we've got room for 8, maybe 10, this is the price. That price is going to be way lower than anyone will get online, or if they go individually, or if they set up their own crew from scratch. What we do, or what I do, is we don't make any money from the trips. What we do is we pass all that saving through. So if you were coming ads, you basically get the trip for 500 quid less than if you book direct. And all I do is just organise it. And then through Greenover, you know, if people want kit and boards, or they've never been before and they want some advice on what to take, because, you know, the freshies that just turn up is hilarious. You know, within 2 days, they've rubbed themselves basically raw, just from paddling around with no top on. So we do all of that sort of stuff. And then if the first trip that people have is a really good experience, then they're on that list every year, desperate to come back. So if we could book more trips, we would do. But you'd be amazed how many are on the list but never actually make it.
Talk a little bit about the process of booking the trip, so what you do.
Yeah. Well, it's a big subject, actually. I mean, so much goes on behind the scenes, which no one will ever see. I mean, if you ask anyone, I mean, I know you've organised loads of stuff, like way more complex stuff than boat trips. But especially now, boat trips are super complex. But a lot does go on, and it depends where you're going as well. So Maldives, you can pull together really quick. I mean, we've done 20 or 30 there. It's super easy just because of the location. It all starts with who's in the crew. And I often find that you start with a little list of like 20 people that want to go. Then you got to pin down that date. And you'd be amazed how many people phone me and start saying, oh, well, let me take you through my work diary and my work commitments. I'm like, I don't care. Are you free on these dates? So you have to juggle like a final list of, say, 12 guys. You have to juggle all the dates. But what I actually do is you've got to work in parallel with, say, like we've got some stuff coming up with Mentawai Surf Co. Guy Morgan over in Indo. They're in a boat called Solar Gracia. Like, they're the best. Like, there isn't a better guy in Indo at all. And he rips. Lovely guy. So what I did with Guy is we pinned down the best week. So if you're going to go to Indo, if you're going to go out of season, you run a risk, and you need to let everybody know who's booking that there's a risk in the waves. It's not that much of a risk. But if you go in the middle of peak season, like say July, August time, you need to let people know there's a risk that it could be 10 foot every day. So it's not only doing the dates, it's letting people know the risk. And what is risk for me, because I've been so many times, that might be minimal, right? But for somebody else who's never been before, who's got kids, who perhaps hasn't travelled, who perhaps hasn't been away from home for 2 weeks, for, you know, particularly that part of the world, they're completely freaked out, but they really want to go, you know, and they've got the money and they're good to go, and the missus has signed it off. So you have to juggle all of that social stuff that people have in their lives, and you want to do it. You know, I don't want to count people out, but at a point you then have to say, these are the dates, the boat is locked in, you're in once you paid. Then you've got the money transfer processes. You know, they want $10,000 up front, and if they're not English or British registered, then you got to offshore all that cash. And if you've ever tried paying a random bank account 10 grand in one hit from your own account, it's really hard because a bank won't let it happen. So I have to phone my bank and get authorization to pay it. Then you've got, what day do I pay it because of the exchange rates, which at the moment are all over the place. So you say to your crew, right, it's 10 grand a deposit between 10 of us, it's all good. And then the exchange rate skunks you and you've got to put it up another $100 per person. So you got to be super careful not to layer up all the costs just in the faff of organising it. And that's the major hump over. Then you got flights. Then you hit, right, what are we going to surf? What sorts of waves? What kit do I take? How do I get fit? And people start asking for training programs to get fit to go to Indo. And I'm like, just go surf, right? And just perhaps don't drink so much beer for a little while.
Go on YouTube.
Yeah, super easy stuff. But then you get to boards. What boards do I need to take? And that's the most fascinating subject out of everything. I've seen people turn up with 2 coffins of board bags and surf one board. I take loads of boards, only ever surf one board, so I'm just as bad. But people come to destinations where the waves are likely to be pumping and they got all sorts of crazy stuff. So what goes on in the background is really labour intensive. And I generally get everything going. I set up like a WhatsApp group, like all the simple stuff helps. But if anybody wanted to know what it's like, put a crew together of 10 people and get them to Indo safely, on a boat safely, surf for 10 days safely and back home safely. And when you're not really like qualified, I'm not a medic, I'm not a travel guide or any of those sorts of things. So it puts the pressure on. But, as soon as you're there, you're surfing, so it's all good.
I definitely understand what you're saying about people asking questions. Hence the reason why I'm doing a podcast called The Grumpy Surfer. Yeah. I'm very sarcastic, quite cynical, narcissistic, potentially. So when people are asking me stupid questions like, do I need to take a rash vest? What type of rash vest do I need to... Yeah. Do I take boardies? What do I put under my boardies? Do I take a wetsuit? Boards and stuff like that. I'm like...
Yeah, just
I'm
work it out.
organising the trip.
Yeah.
I'm not packing your kit for you. Do that yourself.
Yeah, I'm the same. And what I do is I just highlight all the things that could go wrong. So there's nothing... When you're on a boat trip and you're in the middle of nowhere in Indo, if you got a problem with one person on the boat, it puts everyone else's trip at risk. And we've had this before, actually. I mean, I have kicked a few people off boats because they can mentally freak out and get super homesick, and they're trying to get on the sat phone every 5 minutes at 200 quid a minute. Or they're starting to hassle the skipper, who's actually ultimately in charge, to take the boat back to Padang, 100 miles away. That's the trip gone and over. So I try and make sure that we minimise that risk by at least having people... I mean, you never know where they're going to freak out, and a lot of people do freak out and just got to get off the boat. Most places now you go to in Indo, though, you can offload people onto an island, stick them on a fast boat, and they can look after themselves. Same in the Maldives, actually. We stuck a few guys on an island once. I don't know what they did, but we saw them back at the airport when we all left. I think they'd had a whale of a time. I don't know what they've been doing. But one guy flogged all his surfboards. He was going to marry some bird on some island.
No way.
Yeah. But you do have to manage people a little bit to make sure there's no risk to the rest of the trip. And it's really simple stuff. Like they've worn the skin through to the ribs just from paddling around, or they've hit the bottom, or they've not known how to clean up cuts and bruises. They've got... I mean, God, we could... The stories I could tell about injuries.
Let's do it.
Well, we had... in fact, this one wasn't long ago. Was it 2017, maybe? We surfed... As me, I think you've had him on the podcast, Stu Pointer. Mm-hmm. It was late one evening. It's actually in the Maldives, but the swell was pumping, absolutely massive. No one was really surfing. And Stu and I surf a lot. And the boat that we're on, this crew, I'd say they're all kind of like intermediate surfers, pretty fit, but not, we don't have any like guys that have been surfing 8 hours a day for God knows how long. But Stu and I were kind of on it, and we pulled up at this wave called Quotas. And it's a really gnarly right-hander when it's big, really thick. I mean, it doesn't feel like you're in the Maldives at all. Pretty shallow. Anyway, it's a super fast bowly takeoff, and the end section is razor sharp. So you kind of skip into it, skip down the line, do whatever, and kick out. Easy paddle out back to the lineup. But if you're caught under this thing, it's a killer. Anyway, it's late in the evening. Everyone had surfed all day, and Stu and I got back in for an evening session. One of the other boys jumped in with us, super keen. Lovely guy, actually pretty fit. But the wave was probably just a little bit beyond him for that time of the day with the amount of energy that he had left. And despite my best coaching effort to say, look, do you really want to get in here? Like, Stu and I are just going in for an hour, going to blast a couple, then we're going to get out for a couple of beers. But he was having none of it. He's like, no, I'm getting in. I've got to maximise my week. I'm definitely getting in. And he was having none of it. So he jumped off the boat with us. Now, I've surfed with him a whole bunch, and usually he paddled to the line up to the peak pretty slowly, and Stu and I were there pretty quick. Anyway, I've done the loop, 3 or 4 different waves. Stu's surfing his backhand, he's done the same, and we're feeling it and we're tired. And this guy, he didn't have any waves, but he'd paddled for at least half a dozen by this point. Anyway, I've had a wave, kicked out on the inside, and he paddles for this bomb. And I'm like, he's not caught it very quickly, but he's still paddling. He should have backed off, but he paddles and paddles. Anyway, by the time he stands his feet, his thing is absolutely pitching. He's in exactly the wrong place, and I'm like, this ain't going to be good. Over he goes, but he pops up. He's been under the water for a long time, and he's popped up right the way down the line where I've just kicked out of a wave. Anyway, pops up. All I can see is a massive pool of blood and his board. Then his head comes up, and I'm like, fuck, are you all right? What's going on? And he turns around, and what's happened is, as he's gone over the falls on this thing, the point of his board has gone in under his eye.
Oh, no.
And skewered the whole lot out.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I'm like, shit. And actually, we had our big boat parked, like, probably 200 yards away. But those guys couldn't see what was going on. And I'm like, he's right in the impact zone. I'm the only one around here. I can see what's going on. And he comes up and he's shouting, help, help. And he's just shouting in that way. And I can see what's going on. It's pretty savage. And I'm like, right, I'm in. So I paddled in, grabbed him, got him on his board. And I just paddled him out. He's paddling with one arm. I'm paddling with one arm. And I'm pulling him out. Anyway, the guide, Ali in the Maldives, he's awesome. Awesome guy. He's straight in, paddles over, brings a little speedboat over as well. Anyway, I scoop up the contents of what's come out of his eye and basically put it back in the socket and get him to put his hand on it and paddle him back to the boat. And by the time we've got him back to the boat, like his whole his head has completely swelled up and there's just blood coming out from under his eyes. Really nasty injury. So that's a really bad one when people kind of don't judge it right, because there are consequences in a lot of these waves. And it's a freak accident because the end of his board, it could happen anywhere. It could happen 2 foot, like at our local. So it was a bit of a freak accident, but it happened because someone got in when they probably shouldn't have done, more than anything. But anyway, like within 12 hours, he was back on the boat, beers, happy days. And thank God, after a number of surgeries, he's absolutely fine. He can see, everything works. You wouldn't even notice it now, although you can paddle around him a little bit easier because he can't move his eyes quite so quick. But you see some horrible stuff, and it's usually because people just don't necessarily judge it. So a lot on boat trips, a lot of, I'd say, coaching goes on to make sure we avoid those sorts of things, because quite easily the whole trip could have been pulled. We could have to take everyone back to the mainland whilst he's in hospital, and for some people that would have been a big issue. They're like, well, why should I spend all this money? With
some of those trips as well, people might argue about the price that it costs for something, but normally the more expensive ones will have like the insurance policies, and all the policy and the health and safety behind it to ensure that, you know, they are good to go in all respects, because you're in another country, you're halfway around the world. Those types of countries are not renowned for having the most health safety hospitals in the world to deal with like massive trauma injuries as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So you know what you're paying for with those trips is actually what you're getting your money for with how they look after you too.
Yeah, and you need know-how. So like Maldives now, I mean, that injury, that accident I just described, the private healthcare the guy got, was his access to it was quicker than it would have been. So say you have an injury at Croyd in the middle of the summer, it's going to take you a long time to get to hospital because you're not going to get an ambulance down that road, you know, and you might wait for a helicopter. He was in surgery in 45 minutes. I mean, they picked him up in a doctor's powerboat with 2 400s on the back of it, and they just blasted it to the horizon. And he was back again pretty quick. So that worked well. However, you go to Indo, and I've seen people stitched up with a rusty fishing hook. In fact, there's one guy, he shoved his hand in a reef as he fell off a wave, and it ripped his finger off. And that one, I don't know, I can't remember how that one was fixed. Basically, I think he took loads of pills. And they just tied some fishing line around the stump of the finger and packed him off somewhere to some island, and they just basically closed it over. But he's fine now. He went back. He's still surfing. But you see all sorts of stuff over there. So you got to have in your insurance policy, you got to have medevac. You know, I probably ought to be better at checking people have got all that stuff, but I just assume they have. I tell them to have it, but
sometimes it comes with the packages. Other times it's an individual's prerogative whether they want it or not.
Yeah. I mean, you're not supposed to be on any of the boats unless if you've got anything less than a minimum standard of medevac, emergency evacuation. Because what that does, it means that if you've got to get off the boat, you can get off the boat, but everyone else can stay put and still have their holiday.
Well, let's swing this round. Let's put it in a bit more of a positive light.
Yeah.
Spoke about some pretty hardcore shit for the last 10 minutes.
No, they're super good. I mean, those things are rare, really rare. I've done, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe like quite a few trips year in, year out on the bounce. And there's only maybe 3 or 4 gnarly stories. I got way more gnarly stories from surfing like local reefs around here and just beach breaks and stuff. Way more. So it's part of surfing, right? It's probably why we do it.
What makes a good boat trip then? What combinations of putting it together? I think we've covered a lot of it already. But
no, it's a good point, because the ones that I think are the best are the ones where you got a really good crew that are easygoing, that get on, that are happy to chip in and buy a round of beers, and what goes around comes around. You're never out of pocket on these sorts of things, but a crew that definitely gets on, because if they get on, then the days where, say, one of the surfers who's an intermediate surfer or a beginner wants to go surf 2-3 foot, nice, mellow, lefts and rights, they have that day or they have that afternoon, but the whole boat goes in with them. They probably don't like that because it means there's loads of people in the lineup, and everyone enjoys those sorts of surfs. So the crew that you go with, if they all get on, it makes it brilliant, because then deciding which waves to surf every day is not an issue at all. And, you get days where it's cranking and 3 or 4 will get in, you surf lefts and surf rights. So all that variety makes it brilliant. And because every night's a party. Every night, as soon as the sun goes down, the stereo goes on, the food comes out, the beers come out. You're looking at all the photos from that day, and it's just brilliant. I mean, if I could just live on a boat, it'd be ace.
One of my wife's friends, she was in a relationship or is married now. A guy that owned a boat in Indo, but he wasn't a surfer, he was a diver. Yeah. So they lived on a boat for, must have been about 5 or 6 years, had a kid. Yeah. Kid lived on the boat with them as well. Nice. It must have been a nice existence, but also I've been on boat trips as well, and I understand that you can't, the comfort level is not, what it would be in a house with your sofa, your TV. I'm not saying that those are your needs and wants and all that sort of thing, but it can be quite a rough lifestyle as well.
It can be, yeah. I mean, there are a couple of boats. There's a couple of boats in Indo, and in fact, the Maldives, which are super pimped up. They're amazing. But I take my boards and a backpack with a few pairs of shorts and stuff in it. And you do it's not roughing it. In the good old days, we used to really rough it. But now the boats, they're pretty luxurious. Most of them have got Wi-Fi. If you pay a little bit more. Some of the boats we have got we have one, when was it? Just before the pandemic. It had a massive bar on the middle deck, and every evening we turned it into a nightclub. So it had like a disco ball, sun lounges, and you just see all these little speedboats from all the other boats that are moored up come over, and before you know it, you've got like a little mini nightclub on the go. So it's not too bad these days, but it's not quite family proof just yet, unless you're into that sort of thing.
I know you were quite keen to spin a few stories about your boat trips and stuff.
Yeah, done a few of those.
Yeah. So what have been some of your most memorable trips that you've been on?
Yeah, well, we had, in fact, they've not yet blended all into one, but there's one in particular which I like, and it goes back to Dan Maker. I know you had on the podcast, mentioned him. who I do a lot of stuff with. But this was maybe 3 years ago, I think, and it was just a quick blast. We went to the Maldives, and it was we had a huge boat, massive boat, but for a very small crew of just guys around here, basically, that came with us. And there was one session in particular that I remember, and it was first thing in the morning at a wave called Cokes, right-hander. Probably people listening to this will know it or have seen it anyway. On its day, it breaks like Indo. It's a brilliant wave, loads of power, loads of grunt. Quite an easy wave to move around in. Anyway, Dan's a great surfer, really good surfer, but I've never really seen him surf perfect, right-hand, hollow, like reef breaks. And with a suntan, Dan can look Maldivian, which is a weird thing to say, but it also means that Dan can sit anywhere in the lineup and get any wave he paddles for. So he's quite a handy bloke to know. So I usually sit right next to him and make sure everyone knows I'm with him and I need to get a wave as well. Anyway, this session in particular, we were in for quite a few hours, but it was well over, I'd say like maybe double overhead, maybe a bit more. And I just remember getting 3 or 4 waves, like all time, slotted out the other end, pretty easy, minimum risk, but amazing waves. And every time I paddled back out, Dan was in the slot, front of the queue. And I remember, I don't think he was surfing some tiny little shortboard, actually. It was quite funny, unusual for him. And I remember seeing him take off on just a perfect doubling up, probably double overhead as well, right-hander. And he just slid into this thing, and the whole way down, he just stood on his board, hands behind his back. And he was in. I mean, he wasn't super deep or anything, but he was in. But from where I was, it just looked awesome. But the thing I found it most memorable is just a look on his face, because I think that's probably the first time in a long time that he'd been in that situation, surfing that good on that type of wave. And then the next guy off was another good mate of mine, pretty much exactly the same. Then the next guy off, really good mate. So our boat, pretty much, I mean, there's only like 6 or 7 guys in. Most of them are our crew. And the lineup worked perfectly. Everyone was getting slotted and the waves were unbelievable. And I remember that one really well, just because when we got out, we were so stoked. I mean, the feeling was just awesome. And that's why you do boat trips. And I could probably recount that type of story 3 or 4 times a year for the last 20 years. So that's why we do them. It's just amazing.
They're definitely one of those things that people always dream of doing.
Yeah.
But like a lot of things in life, everyone's very much, I wish I could do this and I wish I could do that. And, I wouldn't be brilliant if I could do this. No, well, just go and do it.
I'm the same. I'm like, do it. Because people say, it's a one-off trip. There's a few guys like, it's a one-off trip. I've got to get sign off from the missus. I'm like, it ain't a one-off trip. Like, how many times do you go skiing every year, or how many times do you do all these sorts of things? If you want to come to the Maldives, it's a week. That's all you're going to cook. Just take that week off work. It's not that much. We can turn a Maldives week in for like 800 quid. Flights on top. Indo's a bit more because you're going further. But as soon as people kind of do it once, they then realise that they can do it year in, year out. And that's cool, because then people are surfing a lot. They get better at surfing. I mean, if you want to get better at surfing, do those sorts of trips.
So how does COVID affect the boat trips now? So how does 2021, 2022 look with COVID in it?
Yeah, well, I think it's suffice to say that everything basically just ground to a halt. As a bunch of CTers got over there last year, just as we were working out what the hell to do during lockdown, and they all scored it. They're on a Sibon Baru, I think, a boat called Sibon Baru, and they've had visas, and they got there on the basis that they're obviously working because they're all pro surfers. That's about the only trip that I can think of that's like out there that's really taught us how to do this. So basically the pandemic hit and we couldn't get there. No one can get there. Travel's off. And also people are completely freaked out. So even if you could go, no one really wants to go. There's no vaccines, none of that sort of stuff. So we pushed everything from 2020. We pushed it all into this year, 2021. And it's all pretty much from the end of June onwards throughout the rest of the year. So, it's meant that last year the Mentawis were empty, but a load of the operators aren't making any money, and you can only get there with visas. Indo then, I think towards the end of last year, went on shutdown. So then you couldn't, they got ahead of the visa thing and said you can't even get in or out. Plus, if you are going to get in and out, when you leave, how do you get back into your own country without going through quarantine? It's really difficult. Obviously Brazil aren't going anywhere. So the whole thing's gone on lockdown. This year, it looks like things are opening up, because what I think they learned in Indo is that they can make a little bit of money through visas, but we don't yet know whether we'll need a visa to get there this year or not. In fact, I'm meeting Guy Morgan from Mentawai Surf Co tomorrow, he's flown in and out. He's got a place on HTs, runs solar glassy or boat. So I'm just going to ask him, what does he think? What does he reckon? Because we got trips at the end of July, and we want to be able to make sure that we can get in and out of the country. That's UK, but then also in and out of Indo. I think once you're on the boats, you're okay, because every lineup at the moment seems to be really empty. There's a few land camps are still operating and people can get in and out, because if you're locked down in Indonesia, you can travel, say, from Bali to Indo, to the Mentawais. That's fine. But I think generally it just ruined it all for 18 months. But my way of thinking is maybe this year, if you can get there and you can take the extra logistics, like testing at airports, all that sort of stuff, lateral flow tests, maybe a visa to be in Indo for, 30 days or whatever. If you can get there, it's going to be empty. So everyone running boats over there and land camp says it's empty. If you can make it, you want to get here, because empty Indo in 2021, unheard of. So we're pushing through. We're going to try and make it happen. Fingers crossed. But it's pretty devastating, to be honest, to roll all those trips, because we lose a lot of people if you roll from one year to the next, because they might not have the cash, or they've lost jobs, or they're nervous about vaccines and traveling. So that's been a whole bunch of other phone calls to try and help people through their own thinking.
I think once June rolls through and people can kind of get back to normality, you can use that in inverted commas or not, you can kind of see where you sit with it, I think, a little bit. I think everyone's in the same situation, regardless of whether you've run surf trips or just, your standard holiday brokers like TUI or Thompson or somebody like that. Everybody's going to be in the same situation. Hence probably the reason why we've got these like stay vacations that everyone keeps talking about.
Yeah, they're all going to come here, aren't they? And I mean, I might Airbnb my house. I'll get a few weeks in Indo for that, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, the cost of going on holiday in this country, when you look at centre parks, for instance. Yeah. The amount of money that you'd pay for centre parks for a week, you could easily go out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I've got a week off at home with a family and the kids, and say we're surfing, whatever, staying somewhere, load of stuff going on, eating out, I'll spend more money doing that in a week than I will being in the Maldives for a week on a boat. I mean, it's not obviously got my family involved, which is the downside. But like for like, you're not spending too much more money once you've got there. But yeah, it's going to be weird. I think this year we might just, if everyone's up for it, all the guys that we've got coming this year, they're still up for it. A lot have been vaccinated, which tells you the average age of some of these guys that are on the boat. If they're up for it, then I think we'll push through, because the opportunity to score empty Indo is too big. I can't pass it up. Got to make it happen.
You're making me a little bit angsty.
Yeah, well, you're coming now. Yeah, if anyone comes off the boat, you'll come in. In fact, we've got a space in July. There's only 9 of us going, and of the 9, I'd say there's 4 or 5 that will be surfing all the time, and then we got some guys that'll be catching big fish and chilling the beers. I'm
not going to lie, and I know you said it, but if I told my missus I'm going to go surfing in July, she would have cut my nuts. I'm just going to say it. I am coming.
It's a business trip.
Mate, you live down the road, so it's stupid to not make the use of the opportunities.
We got to make it happen. Yeah,
100%.
Definitely make it happen.
Let's talk a little bit about Green Overhead and Green Over Sports. So how did you get involved with Dan and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, years ago, I did a little bit of road biking just to kind of keep fit. And Dan, as you know, is like an ex-pro road biker, but he's always surfed all his life. I think he had a few years off to do his road biking and mountain biking stuff and build his business. But we did a bit of bike riding together. And the first time I met him, we're like, oh yeah, I do a bit of surfing. And he's like, yeah, I do a bit of surfing. And I'm like, well, I organise boat trips. And he's like, oh, that sounds super cool, but I'm not fit. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Just get fit as you surf. Just come. Anyway, we got him on a boat. This is going back years. We got him on his first trip to, I think, Maldives. A quick week. Maldives is a real good like tester for people. So if like they like that, very quickly they go, right, we're going to go to Indo. And I'm like, that's good because Indo's better. But anyway, we got him to the Maldives, and he instantly great, just a lovely guy to travel with. He's got entry into all the first class lounges at all the airports, which is very handy. So I think we'd had a few beers before we even got on the plane. So it was started off well. But then within a couple of sessions, he was surfing waves he's never surfed before, loving it. He was ripping as well. His surfing just went through the roof really quickly. And his board started getting smaller, more high performance, all that stuff happened. So when you're on a boat with a load of blokes for a week, just, chewing the fat and drinking and surfing and stuff, you come up with loads of business ideas. So by halfway through the week, I was like, Dan, I think it would be really good. You got Green Over Sports, loads of action sports. How about you should start up a surfing business. We actually tried to get him to buy the boat, first of all, but he said no to that. Although it's still on the cards, I reckon. So we got home and I think probably within 2 or 3 months, he'd set up Green Overhead. And he'd immediately got opportunities to sell all the major brands, all the kit that we would use on a routine basis, but all the kit that people would need to go on boat trips. So he just got so into it. He's so good at business. He's so good at networking. He knows everybody, and he's very fast to get things done. So he set up Green Overhead, and I said to him, well, I'll organise a whole bunch of boat trips. We can use them as a bit of marketing. It's basically the idea that we'll get all of our mates onto super cheap boat trips. If they want some kit, odds on people will need kit to go on boat trips. We'll give them deals through you for boards and fins, all that sort of stuff. So it just started working, and it went from there. And then all of a sudden he's doing Paizel boards, which at that point in time, no one was really doing in the UK that much, but they were about to go massive, obviously. And then I said to him, well, you're doing Paizel, that's good. How about this other brand called Sharp Eye? Try doing those as well. He got hold of Sharp Eye super quick, which are like the best things I've ever surfed for me. I just love them. And it kind of went from there into Dakine as well. So I don't really have too much to do with the business. I think I'm more like his surf trip PA now. I just book trips and put them in his diary, and send him a list of surfboards that he needs to buy and sell, of which at least half a dozen are specifically custom for me. And just supported him in creating probably the best wetsuit on the planet right now, with a big brand on it.
Let's talk a little bit about the Green Over association with Dakine then, because I've been privileged enough to have a couple of the wetsuits and try them, the shorties, the summer.
Yeah, you've seen they're awesome, aren't they? Yeah.
They are amazing. And I tried I've had the 543 this winter.
That Cyclone.
With the 2 mil hoodie vest underneath.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's like the hottest thing on the planet.
Yeah.
And even when it was like the coldest part of the winter.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It was killing me.
Yeah.
I had to take my hood off at points.
Yeah. So it came about Dakine are a massive brand and they're involved in lots of things. And Dan is obviously aware of them because they do mountain biking, snowboarding, all the action sports that Dan's into basically. And we had a conversation at one point and Dan was thinking, well, do I create my own wetsuit and brand it myself? And I don't know how we ended up getting there, but he'd networked his way into Dakine with a view of the only category they hadn't got for Dakine. And Dakine is technically actually a really high-end technical brand, huge amount of brand loyalty. Globally, it's massive. And customers, once they've had Dakine stuff, keep coming back because it's well constructed. And the only thing they didn't do was a wetsuit. Yet you look at the range of pro surfers that they sponsor, they've got everybody. And they take on all the best guys. It seems like any new kid on the block, immediately Dakine get hold of them. So their team roster's massive. But the one thing it didn't have was a wetsuit. So Dan just set about saying to them, right, well, if you're up for it, I'll do all this for you. I know the industry, but I know how to manufacture, I know how to distribute. I've got an idiot called John Jameson who likes flashy wetsuits, and he's got some ideas. I don't think he said that, but he probably was thinking it. And before long, he's then designed like the first generation of wetsuits, which I remember we took them down to the contest in Hossegor, and we talked to all the Dakine guys, like the global head of marketing for Dakine was there for all the water sport stuff. All the pros were there as well, so we had to hang out with all those guys.
Yeah, had to hang out with all them.
Yeah, well, it was really, really good.
Must have been really shit.
Yeah. It was really good until we had to go surfing with them, and then all of a sudden I'd pull my hamstring, couldn't get in. I think I talked it up a little bit more than I should have done, which is standard. But we had those guys trying on the wetsuits. They were loving them pretty quick. All the feedback was good. And that was the first generation. Those are the first suits. I was wearing them, like, I think, you're onto the Cyclones and stuff, which are the second generation, but a few of us were wearing them. So we were able to improve them really quickly. And it's amazing how many pro surfers know nothing about wetsuits, because most of the time they're not wearing them.
But they know nothing about boards either.
Yeah, because they just get shaped for them.
Yeah.
So when we were talking to them, they were like, oh, you guys really know what you're doing. I'm like, yeah, well, we've been wearing wetsuits for 30, 40 years down to, what do we get in this country? Lowest I've been in is like, apart from the wave pool, like 6 or 7 degrees, chilly Lynmouth on the right-hander in the river. So we know wetsuits. So we tested a whole bunch, a few design iterations later. And essentially the one that you're wearing now, the Cyclone, that's what I've got as well. I've seen some new stuff coming up as well. They're just unbelievable, because we were wearing all the other major brands that are awesome wetsuits, and we just piled all of that experience, all the best bits of all the wetsuits into one suit. And it's very rare. I don't think another company's really done that well. And we're making tiny little changes, like even around the ankles, like thinner neoprene around the ankles. I don't get cold ankles, but I would want it to be quite lightweight around the bottom of your legs. So we made a few little tweaks like that, and now you put these things on and they are so hot because they fit really well. The neoprene's the highest end neoprene you can get. But because it's tied into Dakine, it's a Dakine wetsuit, it's under the Dakine brand, I think it's gone crazy. You can't get one now. You walk around a warehouse, there's none. I
spoke to a couple of guys on the water, and they're asking about the suits, and they said, well, where did you get it from? And I didn't really tell them, but what do you think of the boots and what do you think of the gloves? And I said, look, I've got some 3mm gloves on, and it's like super cold, and my hands go down really, really quickly because of the environments I've been in, and my feet as well. And boots and gloves are amazing. Yeah. And I just said to them, look, they're really, really good. You need to get yourself a set. But they also said that they've been on all the websites and they can't find any of the suits or the accessories to go with it because they've just sold out. Yeah,
they go so quick, and that's where Dan's smart, right? So you've got to run a business. You can't just, spend all his cash and run it all into the ground. So you've got to run a business at the same time. But it's still young, I would say. But the quality of what's coming out now, with all the research that we do and the amount of time, yesterday we spent 2 hours talking about just the no zip entry system, and even this morning you and I have looked at some of the cool stuff coming up. So you put all of that into it, and it means it's a really good suit. It's going to sell a lot. And Dakine around the rest of the world is a massive brand. So you go to the States, they will want Dakine wetsuits above anything else because they're super loyal to a highly durable, high kind of tech wetsuit, and that's what they've got now. In this country, it's definitely growing. It's weird. Like, we can paddle out and I'll see other people wearing Dakine wetsuits, and I'm always interested, where they got it. And they obviously got it off Dan, off the website, but what they think of it. And everyone's like, this is amazing. And now some of the little groms up and coming, they're like, oh, how do I get a sticker? And how do I get a wetsuit? And can I have it for free? And all this sort of stuff. And you want to say yes, right? Because it's all good stuff. You want everyone having a good time and surfing with the best kit. And it's better that it's ours than anyone else's. It's just, it's hard to get your hands on these things when they start coming through. I think they're all stuck on a container ship somewhere in the sea.
In the Suez?
Yeah, probably, yeah. It's full of wetsuits, yeah. There'll be loads of captains in the Suez Canal wearing Dakine wetsuits in the sunshine. Yeah.
Walking around with these gloves on. These are amazing.
Yeah. Don't tell Dan, he won't be happy.
Fair one. Let's talk a little bit about the boards as well. So you mentioned that Greenover do Dakine, Alone, Sharp Eye, Next and Pizels.
Yeah.
And I know you and Dan trial a lot of the boards as well before you sell them, because obviously, a good bit of market research behind the stuff before you
it's pretty
sell.
handy for free kit. Yeah, so I mean, this is the bit where I'm the boat trip guy and I'm kind of the boards guy, help out with a few other bits and bobs. But I'd say the boards that we've got, the brands that we've got, they're creating boards for a whole range of surfers. And our thinking was that we will stock boards that are going to work for people, that are, a decent price, but they're really well made. But the idea is that we're just not going to sell people boards because it's just what they want. We try to help people get boards that are going to help them surf in a way in which they want to surf. So we take loads of phone calls, we shoot loads of reviews. And what we do is, like, say with Sharp Eye, we get a whole bunch of boards and then we'll keep some samples, or, Dan and I will ride a bunch and there'll be like X team boards, we call them. And those samples, those X team boards, or all of them secondhand boards, people can surf them, trial them, see what they think, ask some questions. So that when they buy a board, and boards are going to get very expensive over the next couple of years, prices are going to go through the roof because there's no blanks, there's no material, there's no glass around the world because of the pandemic. It just allows people that when they do spend anywhere between £500 and £1,000 on a surfboard, they're going to get one that they're going to enjoy. But Pizel obviously makes some awesome boards. We kind of went down that road, I think, because I just wanted to surf a radius because it won't stab in the dark. I was super curious to see what that one was like, and it's unbelievable board. But obviously the Ghost is massive, so we sell loads of those as well. In fact, most of our boat trips, everyone will have a Ghost in their board bag, which is crazy. It's like, I'd never known a board go as big as that, as quick. And obviously it's got John riding it. But the Sharp Eyes are a little bit different. If you look at the QS or the CT now, I would say that Sharp Eye is the most surfed board. And they got like the 77, the HT2, Disco Inferno, that one stabbing the dark with Taj. But so many of those boards are awesome because Marcio Zuvi, he shapes them to ride in California. Actually pretty similar waves to us in the UK and around Europe. But then he's also added like the 77, which will just go in anything. And you've seen the speed of people surfing on a Sharp Eye. Even the local boys that buy them, they're like, this thing is super fast. It's almost got so much drive and squirt, I can't kind of rein it in a little bit. So we're the only people that do Sharp Eye. It's quite cool because Dan is amazing, gives me access to the boards that I want to surf. We turn them over after 6 months unless it's like all-time board, and then it stays in my garage. But they go really well. We probably want to do a little bit more with them, so we're doing more reviews and getting them out there and getting people surfing them. But what we have learned is as soon as someone buys a Sharp Eye, they'll always buy a Sharp Eye. They come back. In fact, we've even had people buy 2 or 3 different brands, one of which would be a Sharp Eye. They'll come back, and one guy came back within 24 hours of surfing them all and said, can I give you back the other 2 brands? Because I just want 3 Sharp Eyes now, and I want these 3 models because it's noticeably different. And we're like, well, yeah, okay. I mean, we don't do secondhand board sales per se, but we'll help people out get on the right boards. But they're all great. And the Alone boards, slightly different kind of price point. I ride like a 5.8 Captain, super flat, super fast. It's one of the smoothest boards I've ever surfed. So if you go to the wave pool in Bristol, or we've got 2 foot down the local, I'll be on that. And you can just whiz down the line, loads of fun. At least you're in the sea getting wet. So it's gone from there. And we looked in the container yesterday. There's like 60 new Sharp Eyes. So I was like a kid in a sweet shop. I was like, that one. I think that we ought to actually sell them.
Yeah. These are actually for the public and to make money out of, not just for you to.
Yeah, I know, because so many of them come in exactly my dims as well. So it's like, oh, that one's perfect for me. And Dan's like, no, you can't have it. And a lot of times they're sold before they're even unboxed, which is crazy. And Sharp Eye's not that well known in the UK. But if you go to Portugal, there's loads in the lineup. You go, Australia's massive. Anywhere else in the world, there's loads of them. But in the UK, we're probably 2 years behind the rest of the world. So if you float around Indo, you probably might not get so many Pizels, but you'll get loads of Sharp Eye, all the usual standard brands and stuff. off the peg boards.
But you not think that's to do with the standard of surfer as well? Because we
A
don't
little bit,
get
yeah.
massively really good guys in the water all the time. I'd say 70 to maybe 80% of the people that are in the water are normally there during the summer, and they're like your Saturday and Sundayers. They're not like your hardcore guys that go down
totally
in the depths of winter.
Yeah.
So the boards that you're talking about there are kind of like at the higher end, a little bit towards the intermediate to the higher end, which probably is why Sharp Eyes don't really...
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and we recognise that, and we've got the Alone boards and Next, and there's obviously there's boards in the Paisel and Sharp Eye range that are perfect for this country. I mean, like I said, we reviewed the Alone Captain last night. That will come out soon online, Instagram. We did like a 1-minute review, and I just remember saying, like, this is a board that's super fast. It will perform as well when you want it to, but it's got all the volume up front. It's got nice, chunky, boxy rails. The wide point is slightly further forward. It's just a wave catching machine, basically. And it will go in as soon as you can surf, up to well over head high. That's what we'll sell more of in this country. But it goes back to people deciding why they want to go surfing. So if you make the assumption, right, everybody wants to enjoy surfing, you get those guys that will just paddle out, drop anchor, and they'll wait for one bomb. I've seen you do this at Lynmouth. One bomb. And they'll smash the life out of it all the way to the beach. And just that one wave with, say, like 5 massive turns on it, spraying buckets. That's what they want to do. That's how they want to surf. But you get other guys that will just scoot around. They just want to get loads of waves and just stand up and cruise. They're two very different ways of surfing and very different reasons to surf. And if you think that process through, it would influence what type of board you buy. We get so many people turning up, and even back on boat trips, right? Say 4 to 5 foot, perfect reeling reef break, real cupped out waves, pretty hollow. You can have loads of rocker and you're still going to go super fast. But we get people turning up with like 5'4" by 25 inches, super flat, no rocker, like 1,000 fins in it, like really wide tail, wondering why they can't do turns. Because they've chosen the board because they just want to be able to paddle around. They're worried about not being able to paddle around and catch waves. So where you're going and what you're doing should influence what boards you get. And the amount of times I've been on boat trips and you like people unzip the coffin and they got 5 boards with no rocker. They're all crazy little twinnies. And everyone watches clips online, like Josh Kerr will rip on a flat twinny at Kandui's rifles or a wave like that. He'll rip, right? But it's Josh Kerr. You put any of us lot on a board that's as flat as that, you just be going over the falls every time because you won't have the time to paddle in and you won't be able to handle the fact it's flat, so you just dig your nose. I mean, you see people do it at the wave pool all the time on the big set, and they're digging the nose because they don't have enough rocker to make the landing, but then they got too much rocker to get down the line with some speed. So we have to nurse a lot of people through that thinking, especially for boat trips. There's nothing, I mean, the amount of times I've given people my boards and said, look, just surf that. I know it looks smaller than you'd normally surf and it's a short board, but don't be frightened of it. You're actually going to love it because this board is designed for this wave. And if you're here because you want to surf and do turns, then get a board that's going to do turns.
I think a lot of board design these days has advanced so much. I mean, we were talking about it earlier about, back in the 90s where you had these little toothpicks and everyone was buying them because the pros were surfing them, but they were like really not designed for the average human being.
No, not at all. They were a nightmare, weren't they?
Yeah, because there was no volume in them and you couldn't catch anything with them. You actually be literally dropping from the sky before, you could catch a rail and then surf it, because that's what they were designed to do for those individual people. I think, going back to what I was saying, board design has come so far now where you do have boards that have got hidden volume. Like my go-to board at the moment is a Firewire Cymatic. I've just connected with it because it's super fast. It holds its speed. It's got a rocker from the nose through to the tail, but it's not so much that you lose all your speed.
But
when
you can still surf that like a shortboard, right? Like hooking turns and but still fast on those flat kind of wheelchair sections.
I've got a 510 and it's nearly 37 litres.
Yeah.
So for my like if you went on a volume calculator, the volume calculator for my height, size, weight,
it'd be like 20 litres.
Should be about 29, 30 litres.
Yeah.
But I understand the way that I surf and the way that I want to is that I want to catch as many waves as possible.
Yeah.
And be able to paddle and still have the energy.
Yeah, you thought about it and bought a board that does exactly what you're trying to do.
But I also have the experience and the knowledge behind 27 years of buying lots of different boards, like those JSs, those DHs that are literally those paper thin boards I surf them okay when I went to France and places like that, but I was surfing them in good waves. Now, if you have a board that's like that, I know a lot of the Sharp Eyes do, and some of the Alone boards, they have like that one quiver killer sort of board behind it, and you have the knowledge, like someone like you saying, like, this is the board that you want to go on a boat trip with, or you want to surf this particular break, or it's a point or whatever. That's the sort of knowledge that you want to be given, not to go like into a surf shop like you used to. I can do this and they'll sell you anything.
They'll sell you whatever with the biggest margin.
And then you've got a piece of shit now that you spent £700-800 on that you're never going to be able to ride correctly because Geordie Smith or John Florence rips the shit out of it, but you're not that person.
Exactly, yeah. And a lot of people say, well, back in the day, the local shaper, which is still a really important part of like the surfing culture, that would be your go-to place to get a board. And like the amount of local boards I've seen produced where actually the concave's on the bottom, it's not a double or a single, it's just like a random squiggly, funny sanded thing. So off the peg is pretty good these days for most surfers, unless you are literally John Florence, and nobody is. We get a lot, but that's the other end of the spectrum. Loads of people turning up on trips and buying boards, and like to listen to them, you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to rip. He's going to be punting airs all over the place. And it's like, you get there and you're like, oh God, how are we going to manage this? And you see their own self-esteem drop through their boots after they've had that ass handed to them on some wave in Indo in front of everybody, because it's a pretty unforgiving place. But yeah, selection of the right boards to surf is all about whether people can have an honest conversation with themselves. I'm terrible. I'm the worst. I mean, I ride, things that are way too small, way too hard, but I'm happy being dishonest to myself just for a couple more years at least.
Do what I say and not what I do.
Yeah, you need a board with loads of volume, maybe get a 20, fly down the line, enjoy yourself. And I'm like, no,
I'm stuck in my ways.
Yeah, 28 litres, some like, oh, God knows what they are. They're just, but once you get on the waves that you should be surfing good, they come alive. So, and that's why I go surfing, is for the turns, not just thousands of waves.
Mate, we've been going an hour and a half, so we'll cut the things just to tie this up. So what's in the pipeline for yourself and Greenover?
Yeah, so there's a few things actually. So we talked a little bit about the Dakine wetsuits. Kind of Dan's got that under control, but if anyone's interested, you can see it all online. It'll start really flowing, I think, as we come out of the pandemic, and obviously that big boat that got stuck in the Suez is all sorted. But we are ramping right up on the boat trips. So we're assuming that we're open for business. We've got plenty of crews lined up and booked in. They've checked with the missus. They've paid their deposits. So that's good. But I think over the next couple of years, we'll get right back to a number of boat trips every year. Be it Maldives or Indo. So that's definitely coming up. I think probably the biggest thing will be expansion of the boards and the brands, and getting loads of local guys in the UK surfing some of these boards. We've got a whole bunch of the local crew riding, wearing the wetsuits, but we kind of want to get a few more riding our boards. And I'm not talking about rippers riding ghosts, Paizel Ghosts. I'm talking about everybody riding our boards, Because what we'll do more than anybody is we're not just going to sell you stuff because it's a margin. That's not what Green Overhead's about. Still need to make money, of course, otherwise nothing works. But it'd be about helping people surf boards where they do have loads of fun and it's right for them. And if we can connect that with people coming on boat trips that have the chance to, if in their world, be on a trip of a lifetime, if we can do that, then that's going to be super cool. But if we can start getting people doing trips of a lifetime every year, that's also super cool. So that's what we've got. Going to keep it simple and just surf as much as possible, because it's been a little bit light on surf in the last 18 months, especially for me.
Mate, sounds outstanding. Finish on the quick fire round then.
Yeah, go on then, hit me with it.
So, if you were going to surf one surfboard setup for the rest of your life, would it be a single fin, twin fin, quad, thruster, or finless?
Oh, the rest of my life.
Rest of your life.
So that's like the second half of my life as well. I'd thruster. I'm going to be an 80-year-old grandpa on a 5'10", 23-litre thruster.
Like Simon Anderson.
Yeah, I wish.
Favourite surfer and why?
My favourite surfer is Andy Irons. Years ago in France, actually, I had the chance to stay in the same apartment as him and his brother and a few other guys. Party hard, surfed hard every day, and he punted over the top of my head as I was paddling for a wave. I think I was attempting to drop in on him. So I didn't really know him that well, but just got kind of hooked up with those guys through luck more than anything. And he's just awesome. He just has a way of going fast and a style that's brilliant. Obviously, John these days is the man as well, but Andy, definitely.
First surf movie you ever saw?
Well, it'll be Endless Summer, I think, probably is the first one. Everyone's watched that, and then I've watched every surf movie under the sun. And these days, I just love watching Stab in the Dark, being an enthusiast for boards and what makes a board go and in what sorts of waves, like the chat we just had. So Endless Summer was the first, but now, I know it wasn't the question, but Stab in the Dark, I love them. They're great. Which
leads me on to the last surfing movie you saw.
Yeah. Well, I've been watching the CT a lot. The last surfing movie, I think it was a Kai Lenny one, actually, where he's just talking about all of his big waves. So was it Red Bull TV? Yeah, I think that was a proper one I watched, but like YouTube channels, watching loads of it.
The best person to share a lineup with?
Two good mates, Dan and Stu.
Worst person to share a lineup with?
Two best mates, Dan and Stu.
That's always people's answer.
Yeah, Stu, Mr. Paddle Round. I hope he listens to this. I'm giving him a message. Yeah.
The one place to surf for the rest of your life, where would it be?
Macaroni's Indo. Best wave on the planet for me. It's a personal thing for everyone, of course, but that left-hander is just unreal. Unreal.
John Jameson, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast, and I appreciate your time.
Cheers, Adz. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Catch you later.
And that's it. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and follow on your podcast provider, and maybe leave a little review on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook, search for the Grumpy Surfer Podcast. Thanks for listening.